Hi everyone, my name is Ian. I'm here at the Fleet Science Center, and today we're going to be taking a look at video game controllers. So what we have here are three different generations of controllers. You can see that two of them used to be wired. We've made them wireless now just for convenience. We do have one wireless controller as well. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this first one. This is going to be the oldest controller of the bunch, and we'll see what its insides look like. So this just has a couple screws on the back that need to be taken out. All right, so now we can lift off the back plate. And there we go. And so you can see right here we have the cable that's coming through. This controller has a couple buttons on the top, and so you can see these are the buttons on the inside for that. And then there's this main board that everything is connected to. Let's go ahead, pull that out. See if we can get this to pop off. And so here we have the controllers. And so you can see that the buttons on the plate they're not sort of physical buttons. Instead, there's just these metal contacts here. And so when you push down on one of these, there's this little black dot here is conductive. And so when you push down on that button, it creates a contact between these two halves here, and that's what tells the controller and ultimately the video game console that you've pressed that button. So it's not like a mechanical button that you might have seen somewhere where you kind of press it and there's a nice little click sound, something like that. This is instead just you're connecting the electrical signal there. There's not really a whole lot much here, to be honest. You can see the buttons on the top work the exact same. They're attached to this cable so that they can be oriented to the side like that. And it looks like there might be some microprocessor or something underneath this little bit of black paste. But otherwise, it's a pretty simple setup, and for an older model controller, that's pretty much what we would expect. So I'll leave this out, and let's go ahead and take a look at the next controller and see how it compares to this particular version. All right, so the next controller we have here, this is a more modern style controller, still wired, or at least used to be. So you can see that this controller has some improvements, or at least some different types of controls on it. So it has the standard buttons like we saw before, so these just press down. But then it also has a couple joysticks. And then it also has this pad, which is probably just buttons underneath it. But let's take it apart and see what it looks like. So again, just like before, there's just a few screws on the back that we need to get rid of. All right. So you can see already the differences between the older style controller and then the new one. So the first thing you might notice, being quite prominent on the back here, is this motor. And so what you can see, I'll try to give you a good view, is it has this flyweight on it. And so this is what what provides vibration to the controller. So if you've ever played a game and the controller is vibrated in your hands, this is the mechanism that does it. So this electric motor turns, this flyweight spins at a high rate, and because it is off balance, so it's only the half disc, it creates a vibration. Similar if you've ever seen a washing machine that was unbalanced and it starts to shake or vibrate a lot. Maybe you have a big blanket on there that kind of got pushed to one side, so the weight's not evenly distributed in the drum. It's that same kind of thing. But here we're using it to provide a more interactive, more immersive experience for the gamer. Looks like there's a couple buttons on the back here. So these look to be more like mechanical buttons. So these are the ones that were driven by these gray buttons here, so the L and R. And so you can see these are much larger than that one, and these are actually sort of mechanical presses. The other thing that I actually just noticed is it looks like there's a sensor here that actually senses how much you press it. So it's not strictly an on-off signal, but when you press, you can maybe see right there, there's a little disc that turns. And what that's going to do is this sensor here is going to sense that movement and be able to tell the game, tell the video, the console, how much you've pressed the button, not just whether it's pressed or not, but sort of the degree to which. So that's kind of cool there. There's a few more screws and stuff that I need to take apart, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I've gotten the control board separated from the housing, so I'm just going to set the housing to the side. So you can see I had to take off the little electric motor. There's a screw hidden underneath that. You can kind of have a better view of the internals here. So this is the button, that top gray button was pushing against. There was a kind of like not a lever, but just an extension of that button that pushed there. And then these little circular guys here are what turn to sort of sense how much that button is being pressed. So you can see with the screwdriver, I'm turning that there. So now if we flip it over, we can see a similar setup. So if I bring this one over for comparison, you can see that this one on the here is a bit bigger, but it uses the same kind of button sensors here. And you can actually see the pad. This was the pad for the directional controller. So this sat right on top. And then when you push left, this would rock to the left a little bit, and it would push that button, making that connection. There's another sensor for a button up on top here. These are just some of the internal ones. Again, we see probably a microprocessor of some sort hidden underneath that black paste. And then we have our joysticks. So we have these two here. So let me see if I can get these off. All right. So pulled off the caps to the joystick. And so now you can see that it's just a stick, hence why it's called a joystick, that just sticks up. And when you move it, it might be hard to see, but you can, there's certain directions of movement or freedom of movement. And so you can move to the side, you can move up and down. And then there's again these sensors on the side here that sense how much movement there is. And so you're able to, again, not just get a on-off, you press the button, you didn't press the button like you would with the directional pad. With the joystick, you're able to, or the controller is able to sense how much you're pressing that joystick. And that's because of these sensors on the side here. Other than that, it looks like it's pretty similar, as I said. There's a cable that was coming out. The sensors for the buttons, or where the buttons actually press, are about the same. But you can see that this controller has a lot more features with the joysticks, with the motor to cause the vibration, the sensors on the back that tell the controller how much you're pressing the button. So you can tell that this is a much more advanced controller and allows the gamer a lot more options, a lot more controls to be able to do what they want to do. All right, so the third controller we're going to take a look at is this one here. You can see it does have joysticks like we saw before. Has a direction control, some buttons, has buttons on the top. But you'll notice that it's wireless. It does have a port here to charge, so you would plug it in to a USB port to charge the battery inside. And so that's another thing we're going to be looking at. This controller is going to have a battery inside of it that powers the controller, whereas for the other two that we looked at, the power came from the cord when you plugged it into the console. So let's go ahead and take this one apart. There looks to be just a few screws on the back, and let's see what the inside is. All right, so I've taken all the screws out, so now let's see if we can break it open. Remove this back casing. All right, and so what we can see here already are, first of all, here's the battery. So it's a lithium-ion battery. All right, so I took out the battery, I should say. Do not take apart the batteries, as I was saying. Again, on the scale, you can see it's relatively small, a little more than 2 inches long, and then about 1.5 inches wide. This is going to be similar to the battery you might have inside your phone, or any other kind of wireless device that you have to plug into is going to have a battery like this, unless it's the cylinder batteries like the A or AA or AAA. Those are not going to be lithium ion. Those are going to be a different type of battery. So we'll go ahead and set that to the side. Internally now, we can see a couple things. So this one also has the ability to vibrate, and it does this actually through 2 different motors and 2 different sets of weights. So you can see on this side, the weights here are much larger, and then the weight here is actually very small, or relatively small. And so what this allows this controller to do is actually to give you different kinds of vibration. So if the video game calls for a lot of vibration, there's a lot of things going on, then it can spin this one, and that'll really vibrate the controller. But maybe it just wants a little bit of vibration, like maybe you're walking and it just wants to vibrate a little bit as your character in the game is walking. Then it can use this one, which is a much smaller weight and only produces a tiny amount of vibration. We can see here that this one has a much larger microprocessor. So again, I hypothesize that underneath this black paste, this black plastic here, these were the microprocessors for these controllers. This one you can see it's a full chip, something that you might have seen in a computer, or if you saw a previous episode where I took apart a video game console, it'll look like a chip that we saw on the board for that console as well. So already this one is looking to be a lot more sophisticated, a lot more things going on. So let me go ahead and take apart the rest of it. We can take out that board and see what's on the other side of it as well. All right, so I think there was just that one screw. So now we can take this board out. We might have to pull out this whole plastic shell. So let's do that. All right, and so now, okay, so this actually looks like there's 2 different pieces. You can see there's this connector wire here, so there's going to be some other things on the front side here. There might be another board that controls maybe these buttons and maybe some of the lights and stuff as well. So we're going to have to go ahead and take out this plastic shell like I thought we might have to get at that. All right, so I unclipped that. There are just a couple of these clips on the side. So now we can pull that out and flip it over. Oh, and interesting. So there isn't a board on the other side. Instead, it's just this plastic film that has some of the wires and connectors built into it. So it still just has this one board, but then it just uses this film to extend the connections of that board to the front side of that this plastic plate here. So that's actually pretty neat. I can just go ahead and pull that off so you can maybe get a better look at it. So there's that there. And again, this is the front of the controller. So if we were to take, say, the directional pad, that would be, so this one here, it would sit right here. And again, it uses the same technology that we've seen before, where it has this little black piece of conductive putty or something. And so when you press the button on top, it compresses that, pushes that putty out, and then makes a contact with the connections here, fulfilling that electrical contact. So again, the controller would kind of sit like this, and then this would be on the back side. All right, so I've taken the board off of that plastic housing. So you can see we have the 2 motors to the side here that provide the vibration effect of the controller. We have those 2 joysticks. So this is actually, let me reorient this for here. So you would be holding the controller like this. So these 2 joysticks are at your thumbs. And you can see you can move them kind of similar to what we saw before. You can move them freely. You can't really tell from the video, but I do sense that these controllers or these joysticks are a bit smoother to move. The other ones were a little clicky, a bit more resistance, but it all works on the same idea. So again, just like on the other one, there's these sensors on the side here that detect the motion. So this detects up and down, and then this one here detects side to side. And then the controller or the video game takes those signals and determines how far to the left are you pressing, how far up are you pressing, and that's how you get diagonal motion as opposed to just up, down, left, right that you get with a directional pad. Other things we can see here, so here's the USB connector. This is going to be where, again, you plug it into charge. You can also connect to the console with it, but it doesn't have to be. There's a box here. I'm not 100% sure what it's for. It could be a processor. It could have to do with the wireless connectivity. So maybe that's where the antenna is or the wireless chip is. This controller connects, I think, via Bluetooth. So that might be hidden in there. You can see there's a few other chips and things scattered about. And then on the back, again, we just have that big one there. And then there's this part here that I'm also not quite sure about what that is, to be honest. The other thing to mention is I think these here are LEDs. And so the controller has a couple LEDs on it to show how much power is connected, what player that controller is associated with. And so if we take a look at the housing, so you can see here how it shows sort of 1, 2, 3, 4. Those LEDs would line up. You can see in the housing, there's kind of this light reflector. So this sits here. The light essentially shines up, and then these light reflectors take that light and bend it so that it shows out the back of the controller as opposed to through the top, which is where the LEDs are actually situated. Let's get rid of these buttons. So that's another interesting thing about this one. So the time frame between these different controllers is on the order of decades. I'd have to look up exactly, but we're looking at probably a good 10 to 20 years between the most recent controller and then the oldest controller that we took apart here. And you can see the evolution as we go. So the most recent one, very simple, just a couple buttons, just these contacts. This middle one incorporated a couple joysticks. It also has a vibrational motor. Both of these are still wired. Then when we jump into the newest model, suddenly we get to a wireless controller. We have 2 vibrational motors, 2 joysticks, and lots of other functionality that's built in there. And so with that, I hope this was interesting. If you haven't seen, I recommend taking a look at a previous video where we took apart a video game console, so you can see sort of how both the controller and the console might work together and how they have similar pieces, and then some of the things that aren't similar between the two.